Hello and welcome back to Tits, Tums and All Things Mum. I'm here with the lovely Emily today from Finding Flow Parenting. How are you?
I am good. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming on. Do you want to start by telling everyone a little bit about you?
Yeah, so I am a conscious parenting coach, which basically means that I work with parents who are struggling in their parenting journey, whether it be through conflict with their kids, through finding it hard to find alignment on parenting styles with their co-parent. Maybe they're really worried about their child's behaviour. And basically I give them the support that they need to find a better way forward. And the real thing is we spend so much time parenting. So it kind of makes sense to optimise that time and make it more pleasant.
Yeah. So we haven't actually in the questions talked about going into the alignment with parenting, but you've said that and I've just gone, oh my fucking God, like, because that is one of the biggest struggles that I have at home, is getting that alignment with two very, very different parenting styles, because everyone's brought up differently with how they were parented and how they expect parenting to be. And my husband and I are totally different. I'm very gentle, emotion-led, kind of conscious parent, and he wants to discipline them and be the kind of dominant character, and we clash. Like, that is probably the main thing we argue about in our relationship. So how do people overcome that?
Yeah, I think it's a really, really interesting question. And I think, you know, when you're first in those early throes of a relationship, you're finding out what each other's values are. But people don't do that around children. People just have children and don't have that kind of formalized discussion around, what do you actually believe about children? What do you believe a parent's role is? Like, what are your values in relation to family life? And because people don't get intentional and focused, and like you say, everybody's coming to parenting with their own baggage, and you know, I talk about it being like your backpacks, right? Everybody's coming with a load of different backpacks. And some of those are like the values that your parents have given you. Some of them are the way that you were disciplined. Some of them might be even like childhood trauma. And you've got all of these different backpacks that you're coming with. And those backpacks are all different. And I think it's so easy to kind of muddle through. And because parenting's so relentless, and to just kind of plod along, not finding that alignment. And actually, when we kind of sit down and have these questions, and reframing really what it is to be a child, what it is to, like, what children need. I think that's a really important one as well. And sometimes people have got quite wonky conditioning that's maybe not serving them in the modern world in the way that our children are being raised. You know, even like schooling's very different. We're in a completely different culture to the one that we were brought up in.
I'd love to say schooling was different, but I feel like in some ways they haven't quite caught up with the emotional side of things. Like one of my daughter's teachers actually called her silly for crying. She was going into school crying. She gets a lot of anxiety. And that one of the teachers was like, oh, just stop being silly. And I was like, excuse me? Because I don't believe that when a child is crying or showing big emotions that they're being silly. There's a reason behind those emotions. So I think there is some catching up to do with that. But this is where my husband and I clash, is that he's like, you're like looking after their emotions too much. They're going to be naughty. And I'm like, they're not naughty. When they're acting up, it's them trying to tell you something. It's them trying to tell you they're overstimulated, understimulated, or there's so much that could be going on in their little brains.
And they did these decade-long studies of children who were emotion coached and compared them to children who were not emotion coached. So emotion coaching basically means the sort of natural process of communicating to your kids what emotions are and helping them to understand the connection between the sensations they're having in the body and feeling words. So that is emotion coaching. So they did these decade-long studies and they found that children who were emotion coached were more successful in nearly every metric. So academic, health, social. And this is the thing, sometimes if we don't have alignment on like emotions as being important, if we're in the mindset of that teacher, for example, that emotions are silly, right, then we're actually missing out on a chance to really benefit our children, because being emotionally intelligent is a huge predictor of long-term success in life.
This podcast is proudly sponsored by Cover My Bubble. Emma and Chris lost their baby girl Lily Beth at 1 month old and faced financial struggles on top of their grief due to not having life insurance. Now they help others by offering insurance for parents, children and bumps, covering critical illness to income protection. Visit covermybubble.co.uk to cover your bubble. I can definitely see that, and I actually didn't get much emotional intelligence until my late 20s, early 30s, because I wasn't really taught that growing up. And it wasn't until I started to read myself that I got that emotional intelligence. But I want my children to have it from an early age, because for so many generations we've just been taught to suppress our emotions and just, you know, get on with it and don't speak unless you're spoken to and all of those things. And we're in a very different time now, and kids are allowed to have these big emotions. My son went to school on Monday, and his teacher pulled me to the side at the end of the day and was like, "We've really struggled with Bailey's behaviour today. He's been really naughty. He's had to sit out several times." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Do you know why? Was it really loud? Was there a lot of people? Was there something going on?" And they were like, "No, he's just been really struggling, really naughty." Got home, he's crying his eyes out, saying, "My ears hurt, my ears hurt." So he's probably been struggling with that all day, and it's come out in his behaviour, because you as a mum generally know your kids aren't naughty for no reason. And I know that Bailey's not a naughty boy. So that behaviour that he was showing was telling them that something was wrong with him, but they don't know him well enough to know that. So I guess it's just about kind of learning those kind of things.
Well, it's kind of about curiosity, isn't it? And I think that's one of the things that I always encourage the parents that I work with to get more in tune with is curiosity, because there's the phrase don't get furious, get curious. And actually when we focus on getting curious as to, I think of it a bit like an iceberg. The behaviour is just the tip of the iceberg, and there's all of the things that are going on underneath the iceberg that are causing that behaviour to happen. But so many parents are stuck, and so many teachers and the school system, because it's kind of overstretched, are stuck in just looking at that little tip of the iceberg, when actually the real juicy parts that we can help our children with are all of this stuff underneath the iceberg. So like the unmet needs, the emotions, like the memories, the fears, like all of these kinds of different things. And obviously your child's kind of unique needs, whatever they might be.
I love that analogy. I'm using that with my husband for sure.
It's a really great activity to do an iceberg for everybody in the family. Because everybody's got their own stuff going on underneath the surface, which is like, and that behaviour is just the expression of that stuff. And if we only focus on that, we're missing out on so much.
I'm really proud sometimes of like us actually teaching my kids these things, because sometimes because I still put my 5-year-old to bed, I still cuddle her to sleep, and it's a really good time for her to offload her feelings of the day. You know, like when they finish school, you're walking home and you're like, "Oh, how's your day? Dunno. What have you done today? Dunno." And it's like, oh. But at bedtime, for some reason, her whole life story comes out. So it's a good time for her to tell me her feelings of the day. And she tells me stuff sometimes, and I'm super proud that she's actually able to put those emotions together with how she's been feeling about something, about a friend, about, you know, feeling worried about school. So it's just about making those connections, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah. And I've been using these really great blob pictures. And so basically they have all of these different blobs and they're all doing different things in the pictures. And then you can say, which blob did you feel today?
Yeah.
And they're really interesting because I'm also trained in somatics as well. So I'm a qualified somatic therapist. And somatics is basically the body. And this is the thing for a lot of us when we were kids. We had sensations in the body. And then we didn't quite have the words because we weren't emotion coached to be able to kind of link those feelings in the body to like a word. Or we might have said the word. We might have said, oh, I feel scared. And then we might have been shut down in that feeling. And then it's quite confusing for a child because they're still having the sensation in their body. And yet there's this disconnect between what the word and the sensation, but the sensation is still there. And that's why I always like working with parents in a kind of full whole brain body perspective, because we don't just exist from here upwards. Like emotional intelligence is like a full body experience.
It's wild, isn't it, how your brain connects to absolutely everything. Like there's been so much research with the gut and the brain and just so much stuff. So it would be strange to just focus on the brain and not everything else as a whole. So how can we, within parenting, use somatics to help us?
I think sometimes it can be the question, when you're talking about feelings with your kids, it can just be a really simple question of, where do you feel that in your body? And they're probably going to say, if they're not used to being asked that question, I don't know. So you can start to say, well, is it in your hair? And obviously you don't feel anything in your hair, so the answer's no. Is it in your toes? And you might say, is it in your knees? Is it in your tummy? And then they might say yes. And then it's sort of like, well, if you were to describe that sensation in your tummy, what would it feel like? Is it prickly, or is it like jelly, or is it slimy? And sometimes just that is enough to kind of make that connection and tune in. And sometimes it can just be that little piece of acknowledgement when the body is being really noisy. If we give it that little piece of acknowledgement, like, I see you, belly, that's all prickly today. I hear you. You're making a lot of noise to signal to us that something's not right. And sometimes that's just enough to just acknowledge the feeling in the body. And that can be very soothing and supportive.
Yeah, I love that. Because it's my daughter had a gymnastic competition recently, and she was telling me that her tummy felt funny. And she explained it to me as like a fuzzy feeling. And I said, does it feel like lots of butterflies are flying around? And she said, yeah. So it's that making that connection between the nerves that she's feeling and that tummy feeling as well. So now going forward, she now knows what that feeling is, which is really good.
Because these things can be quite terrifying. Sensations in the body can be quite terrifying if they're not explained, because they can feel so overwhelming. And that's where we can come in as parents to help make sense of them and validate them and hold space for them and acknowledge them. And sometimes that is enough. That's all that needs to happen for a child to be able to then process. We don't need to fix everything. We just need to hold space for it.
Yeah, definitely. And if you're feeling it for the first time as well, you might be like, what is this going on? I remember because my daughter blushes. And the first time it happened to her, I just saw the fear in her eyes of like, what is going on? And then she came running over to me and just burst into tears. And I was like, it's okay. But how would you kind of work with those kind of things of explaining that it's okay that those things happen?
I think like explaining that all emotions are okay is such an important thing. And I think one of the things I like to talk about is like how emotions are like a big menu, right? And you really, before adulthood, want to sample everything on the menu, because otherwise you can get to like teenagerhood, adulthood, and suddenly, like, if you haven't experienced these things, like I really experienced anxiety in like a really intense way at university for the first time. And it was the most terrifying thing. And actually, it kind of made me think, my son went through a period of anxiety about 6 months ago. And I actually kind of felt more settled with it, because I was like, he's anxious right now. My job here is not to like fix this. He is sampling the menu of all of these emotions. My job is to bring soothing and safety to this experience so that he can like ride the wave through it. Yeah. And, you know, I'm sure he will go through other periods of anxiety in the future, but knowing that, I think this is the thing, knowing that that suffering will not have to be borne alone. Yeah, yeah. That he can experience these unpleasant, perhaps even terrifying sensations and feelings, but like he can always come to me. Yeah. I want to fix it though. Like, I just remember thinking back to being a kid and feeling that anxiety and like embarrassment and all of those things, and just wanting the ground to swallow me up. And I don't want my daughter to feel those feelings, but I know she's going to. The reason I keep talking about my daughter is because my son, he just seems to just take it all and just go with the flow, and he doesn't really express any of those emotions yet, whereas my daughter's quite fragile and she does feel big emotions, and I can see me in her as a kid. So I don't want her to feel those big feelings. Yeah, and sometimes it can be about tending to our own inner child who sees our child suffering, and it reminds us of the suffering that we had that is yet to be soothed. And I think, you know, I've said the word soothed a few times because there's this really great book. It's by the School of Life, and it's called what's it called? It's called The Good Enough Parent. Oh, okay. And they have a whole chapter on soothing. And in it, the first line of that chapter is something like, the most important job a parent can do is to be a good soother. And soothing's not necessarily fixing, right? Soothing is just being there in like soothing presence. And that's so often what we need. Like, I think humans can suffer great hardship, but with soothing, like these things aren't quite so intense. Yeah. And sometimes that fixing can come from a feeling of panic, and like holding space is like coming from trust. Yeah. And that's really sometimes that trust piece is about looking at parenting really expansively. It's being a long journey. Yeah. I think we live in a culture where everything is very fast. There's a lot of urgency. We need to rush. We need to fix things now. And actually looking at it as a really long journey where we have enough time. I say that to myself a lot. I have enough time. Yeah. Because that's what I really, really need to hear in order to stay more centered and grounded in my parenting. Because I think you feel like you need to do it really early on, because you need to get those foundations in there from a young age. But really, you can change things and you can undo things. Maybe you change your parenting style after learning a little bit more. You can adapt and change how things have been before. And I mean, I speak from personal experience. Like, I started my parenting journey really control focused, and then I had like kind of quite super nanny-esque you know, like I did timeouts with my eldest, and then I basically had a period of burnout where I had a kind of mini breakdown. I went to go see a conscious parenting coach. It totally changed my life. I changed everything that I believed. I started learning absolutely loads, and me and my husband completely changed things in our family. And like, it took a little while for my eldest to get on board with that, but I see now how like it's fine. Like, I worried that I had done, I think this is the thing, a lot of the clients that I see, they worry, everything feels very high stakes. They worry that they've done lasting damage.
Yeah.
And this is what comes up a lot. You know, I do like discovery calls with people, and they ask the question, is it too late for me? And they've got like a 6-year-old. And my thing is, it's never too late.
Yeah.
I'm always reassured to know there's a parent coach out there who only coaches parents of 18 to 25-year-olds.
Oh, wow.
And I find that reassuring, because that says to me that there is always time to turn things around.
Yeah.
And like healing can happen at any point in your parenting journey.
Yeah.
Finding a pathway that actually feels good can happen at any
Amazing. I love that. Yeah. And you've briefly touched on like the emotions within parenthood, which there is a lot.
Yes.
There is too many. One of those being anger and rage, which I had no idea how angry motherhood would make me. It's turned me into this little angry person. Yeah. And I think back to my childhood when my mum was quite shouty and I didn't want to be that mum. And somehow, at times, I am that mum. Yeah. And it just sometimes feels like you're a volcano that's about to explode. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I know from speaking to people online and friends that I'm not alone in that feeling. Yeah. How can we sort of prepare ourselves for that feeling and fix it when it does inevitably happen?
Yeah. So I think there's two things here. There's one thing, which is, where is your nervous system baseline at? Because
I think mine's just permanently fucked.
And I think like a lot of people are living their life through no fault of their own in a state of being wired but tired, and they're kind of elevated already in their nervous system. So then something comes along, they get triggered, they're already up here. So like going up to rage going up to rage is it makes sense that would happen. Yeah. So there's kind of one piece in here, which is like, how can we lower the baseline? And for me, that has come through boundaries, through not doing more than I have capacity for. I mean,
Can you tell my ADHD brain that?
Yeah.
It's not listening.
And I think, and I work with a lot of clients who've got ADHD, and that makes sense because one of the things is overstimulation. And overstimulation and rage are... It makes sense that these would come up because you're overstimulated and it can feel really terrifying. Yeah. And then we yell to protect. And I think that's such an interesting reframe, that most of the time when we're yelling to protect. So next time you are yelling, asking yourself the question afterwards, what was I trying to protect? And sometimes it can be you're trying to protect yourself from shame. That one's a huge one. And sometimes it can be that you're trying to protect a value that is being violated. I'll give you an example of that one. I really have a thing where I've got this limiting belief from childhood. It's my old chestnut. It hasn't quite gone out of my system, no matter how much work I've done on it, that I'm lazy. And that limiting belief comes up for me on Sunday mornings, gets to like 10:30 and I'm like, we need to leave the house. We need to leave the house. And one of my values is kind of like outdoors. I'm like, if we get outdoors, we will be safe. And this all sounds very dramatic, but that is really what's going on. So if we can get outside, we'll be safe. If we stay in the house, we'll be lazy. And it gets extremely heightened. And then before I know it, I'm like, I can be like yelling and actually just slowing this down, tending to myself, asking myself what I'm trying to protect myself from. I'm trying to protect myself from me feeling lazy, from my children getting this, but I'm actually exacerbating it because
our brains are so fucking ridiculous, aren't they? Like, honestly, like I'm the same. I'll say, okay, we've got to be out the house by 9:00. For no reason. We haven't got to be somewhere at a particular time, but because I've said we're leaving at 9:00, I'll start getting shouty to get us out the door at 9:00. And I'm like, but why? Who for? Yeah. Like, what is going on?
And sometimes it can be really reminding yourself that like, it's okay to be slow. It's okay to like take things easy. We're not in a rush. Now, obviously, that's harder if you are in a rush. But if you're genuinely not in a rush, just saying, I say that to myself all the time. We're actually not in a rush. I say that to myself. Yeah. And I think as well on the anger front, there can be kind of with the values bit, there's also like your boundaries, when your boundaries have been violated, whether they be like your personal space boundaries, whether they be your sensory boundaries with the overstimulation, or whether they be like rules within your house. But one of the things is often we have not communicated what our boundaries are, even to ourselves, let alone to everybody else in the family. Yeah. So sometimes our boundaries are being violated over and over when we're going into rage, but we haven't even actually got clarity on what the boundary was in the first place. Yeah. Which is being violated.
As parents, your boundaries are constantly being violated by those children who want to climb over you and shout in your ear hole, and the telly's on like 100 and there's noisy toys everywhere, and the extractor fan's going off while you're cooking. So it feels like you're constantly in that state of overstimulation, and it drives me insane.
One of the things that I really like to do when I'm in that, and even when you were saying that, I felt my heart start to beat a bit faster, because overstimulation is so massive. We are meant to be parenting in wide open spaces, outdoors, in the forest, living in reindeer huts, right? And amazing. Our nervous systems have really not changed since our early ancestors who were living in that way. Yeah. And their lives were a hell of a lot less stimulating, less overstimulating than our lives are. But we have the same nervous system. Yeah. It's not like we've evolved to have like a nervous system that can cope with all of these notifications and noises and like so one of the things I quite like to do when I notice I'm going into that overstimulation is I say to myself, I am starting to feel overstimulated. My kids say that too. My kids have got that vocabulary now. That's sometimes amazing. they use that term themselves now. And then I start moving slowly. And the benefit of moving slowly is you're literally communicating to your body that there's not a tiger. Yeah.
Someone said this to me recently. They were like, you're constantly in fight or flight. You just need to remind your nervous system that you're not being chased by a tiger. I was like, how fucking ridiculous that I'm having to tell my brain that there's not a tiger near me. I'm like, it's just the TV's just Cocomelon blasting, not a freaking tiger.
Yeah. The other benefit of slowing down is you actually look quite silly, which can diffuse situations with your children. Yeah. So it's quite like a nice, like, double thing. And there can be even just like 10 seconds of moving really slowly can just tell your nervous system that you're safe. Yeah. And often with those tigers, our nervous systems are interpreting our noisy children as being the tigers. And that's because we're chronically under-supported, because we're meant to be parenting in a village with lots more people to wrangle the tigers.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that. We recently went glamping and there were 7 glamping pods in this field, and one evening I was cooking dinner. The kids were out playing with the other kids from the other pods. My husband was sitting outside playing with the dogs. I was cooking with the radio on and the door open, and I was like, this is so stress-free. Like I'm cooking and it's lovely and the kids are playing with the other kids. And that's what I would envisage the village would be like. Yeah. Like in like a commune with loads of other kids, like one person cooking for everyone. And I was like, this is what I want to live like. But then we go back to our normal life and it's just absolute carnage again. Yeah.
And giving yourself a lot of empathy. Because, I mean, I noticed when you were giving me that description, my heart rate slowed and my breathing softened. Yeah. And giving ourselves so much empathy that we do not have that every single day.
Yeah, I know.
Because we deserve that.
So we should all just move to glamping pods and just live our life in
I'm
the
there.
woods.
I'm there.
I would love that. That would be amazing.
Maybe not in like December.
Oh, no. Although they had heating, so
Oh, okay.
I'd be down for that.
December then.
Yeah.
All year round.
All year round. But inevitably, with all that's going on, we are going to blow at some point.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we then repair that with our children after that has happened?
Yeah. So I think repair, the best kinds of repairs are short. Because when we start doing a monologue, actually we lose the point of our message. And actually sometimes, well, first of all, the repair has to come for yourself first. It's really hard to repair with somebody else when you're still kind of clinging on to the feeling. And one of the things I would say is repair can happen at any point. Sometimes when I'm working with parents, they say, oh, this issue happened a week ago. And I ask, like, have you repaired? And they're like, oh, no, I haven't repaired. And I'm like, well, could you repair tonight? And it sort of hasn't occurred to them that they can still repair a week later. And so I think trusting that you can always move to repair, and it doesn't have to happen when you're still in fight or flight. And actually, it's probably more impactful if a repair happens when you're in the green zone, which is like calm, the ventral vagus, the ventral vagal mode in your nervous system. And so, yeah, that would probably be the first thing, is checking where you're at in your nervous system. Are you cool, calm, collected, open to joy and connection? That's probably the best place to repair from. Yeah. And then, as I said, keeping the repairs short and sweet. Like, I'm really sorry I got so angry. And I think sometimes that can have more gold to it than big things. And I think kind of doing the more like holistic acceptance of emotions in the family. And when your kids are angry, like talking about that later and explaining like how I get angry sometimes, you get angry. I just think there's some families who are big emotion families.
I'm one of them.
I'm one of them too. And there's there can be a lot of beauty and like richness to be found from big emotion families. Yeah. And yeah, so
do you kind of talk about what made you blow? Because I always wonder whether that is making excuses for it. So, for example, at dinner time when you're cooking, there's all this noise going on. Once you have calmed down, your nervous system's calm, do you then say, I'm so sorry, Mummy got so angry, but this was happening? Because I never know if that's them making excuses for the anger, or if you should explain why that happened.
Personally, I think they're two really great separate conversations, because I think when you add a but into an apology,
it's like an excusing
it somehow takes away from the thing is, with a true repair, it feels impactful. And then when we start kind of over explaining ourselves, I think sometimes it takes away from it. But I do think the second bit around like overstimulation, like explaining that you get overstimulated, I think that's another conversation you could have at another point. One of the things I'm really keen on is collaborative problem solving. And collaborative problem solving can look a bit like this. I'm going to give you an example. My son, he had this like bouncy ball. It was a very soft bouncy ball that he was bouncing against a wall in our kitchen, right? And he kept on doing this. And I don't really mind that kind of thing. Like other people would probably hate that, but I don't mind that kind of thing. So he's bouncing this ball against the thing. But the problem comes, I'm cooking and I'm finding it mega overstimulating, having him bouncing this ball.
The repetitive noises, isn't it?
And then the ball's like sometimes bouncing off and I'm like, I'm cooking. I've got like a knife in my hand. There's boiling hot water. This is so overstimulating. I screamed. Later on, I did some collaborative problem solving with him where I'm like, when everyone was in the calm in their nervous systems, I'm like, so we've got this issue where I'm finding it really overstimulating when you're bouncing the ball and I'm cooking. How do you think we could solve this problem? And he came up with, by himself, I mean, he's 8. He came up with, by himself, I could just do it when you're not cooking. I'm like, fantastic. Sounds like a great plan. And then I was like, how can we make sure we remember this rule? And I suggested we've got like a chalkboard. So we wrote the rule up on the chalkboard and then we both signed it. And then it hasn't happened since. And that was a really kind of nice problem-solving bit where it was like this high-intensity situation where I was getting really angry that's kind of solved with his buy-in.
Yeah.
With him feeling like not disempowered.
Yeah, I love that because quite a lot of the time kids just want to feel like everything's their choice, don't they? Whereas, quite a lot of the time we're trying to take that choice away from them. If you're putting the ball back in their court, excuse the pun, then it really works. I can't wait for my son to be old enough to have these discussions. He's just 3, so I'm talking to him, but he's not really like, understanding these things.
I think you can, to a certain extent, still have these conversations. You just give the illusion that by giving lots of suggestions, like, do you think it would be a good idea if we made a rule that we couldn't bounce the ball in the kitchen?
He'd be like, no, and then lob it in my face. This is Bailey all over. You tell him to do something, he does the exact opposite. And I'm like, fabulous. Like, at sports day today, we'd had him strapped in the pushchair because I know exactly what he's like. And then we were like, okay, we're going to let you out, but you mustn't run into where they're doing their sports day stuff. Press the button on the pushchair, off he goes, straight off into the beanbag race. I was like, oh dear Lord. Everyone was laughing. I was like, yeah, that's such a Bailey thing to do. So when he's old enough to understand those things, because what I say to Bella, my eldest, is mummy's feeling frazzled, and that's my word for feeling overstimulated. So she knows that when I'm feeling frazzled, to not be in my personal space and not be too loud, whereas Bailey does the opposite, and he'll start trying to wrestle me or some shit. So it is tough, parenthood, isn't it? And especially I love this conscious parenting movement that's going on right now, but I also do feel like it adds an extra layer of pressure to parenting because you're thinking of their emotions as well.
I mean, one of the things I'm always thinking when I'm in my coaching is like, how can we reduce overwhelm in your life? And I think a lot of the kind of parenting strategies, sort of a bit more traditional parenting strategies, have involved a lot of strategies, as in like reward charts, pom-pom jars. And it's actually like, that's adding more complexity to your life.
They also don't work for me.
They don't work.
I've tried them.
They do not work. They do not work. No. And actually, I think one of the biggest things that I say when I'm working with people is that actually the only tool you need is you. Yeah. Like you, the parent, as a human, having a human relationship with another human. Yeah. It's just you. There's no fancy twiddly things. It's just you. And sometimes that can be helpful because it's a bit like, I need to do parenting. And another way of thinking about it might be just like, I need to be with the other people. It's a bit abstract, but that's kind of like how I think about it. It's coexistence. Yeah. It's not like we're having to do all of these twiddly things.
Yeah. But how do we get kids to do something without reward charts? Because I've had about 10 different reward charts for my eldest, like stickers, different things. Like if you get this amount of stickers, you get some pocket money. But none of them have stuck. They've lasted for about a week. The novelty's worn off. She's gone back to not tidying her room, things like that. So how do we convince these kids without bribery to do the things that we want them to do?
Yeah, I think there's just few nuggets in here. One is getting really curious about what's difficult for them within the task. And
I know exactly why she doesn't keep her room tidy, and it's because she's got too much shit that she won't let me get rid of. So I'm like, throw some out and then you can keep it tidy. But she's a hoarder.
Yeah. And kind of going back to this thing I was saying before, it's like getting the child on board, having them think that it was their idea. I think with some of the kind of chores stuff, One of the things can be, it depends really what your value is around that. Because some people don't care that much about their kids doing chores. So fine for them. Other people, it's like really, really important.
Yeah.
And their child not doing the chores, therefore becomes this huge point of conflict because it's like their values being violated. They like, it becomes like a very panicky situation.
Yeah.
And then maybe there's a kind of point in the middle where there's people who sort of like, it would be nice if my children did this. And some of it's around kind of the first skill in chores, and is not calling them chores, because that just sounds boring and awful, is teaching your kid the skill of looking at what needs to be done and being able to assess what needs to be done.
Yeah.
Sometimes that can be, so I'll give an example. Yesterday, my kids were like out in the garden playing like, they've been watching Bear Grylls. So they were having a Bear Grylls adventure out in the garden.
Fun fact, I was nearly on that show.
Oh, were you? I applied.
I got shortlisted.
Did you?
Yeah.
I did not get shortlisted.
I did. I went for interview and everything, but couldn't get out of uni. So I nearly was on that show.
In another dimension, we were there together.
Exactly. I'd love that.
Yeah.
That would be my dream.
I know.
Escape to a desert island for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
I'd still do it now.
Yeah. I think I would probably still do it now too.
Yeah. The only thing I wouldn't be able to cope with is sand on me. That's the one thing. Hunger, fine. Thirst, fine. Yeah. Sand on me, no. That's one of my things I cannot cope with. Anyway, you were saying they were playing Bear Grylls in the garden.
They're playing Bear Grylls out in the garden. And they pack this backpack filled with essentials for their Bear Grylls trip.
Yeah.
And then they come back inside and they've left all the stuff out in the garden. And then my husband comes in going like, you've left all the stuff out in the garden. Nothing happens. Right? I come in and I say, have a look out in the garden. What do you see? Pausing. Yeah. Sometimes pausing is the most effective thing that we can do because children do not want to feel controlled. Yeah. Because they're humans. Yeah. And humans don't want to feel controlled. Now, this didn't go perfectly, but they did end up cleaning all of the stuff from out of the garden through doing this more kind of problem solving, getting them in that problem solving part of their brain. Because when they're problem solving, they're not feeling controlled. Yeah. And this is the thing, when children feel controlled, they go down two pathways. They either go down the kind of fawning, people-pleasing pathway, or they go down the rebel pathway. You know that At Home with the Furies? Did you? Oh yeah, I haven't watched it. There was this line from their eldest kid, and she was like sneaking out of something, and she just looks in the camera and she goes, what did she say? She said something like, strict parents raise sneaky kids. And she was like sneaking off.
That's so funny you say that because my brother and I went down the people-pleasing route and he went down the rebel route, and we are polar opposites. Yeah. And I've always wondered why. Yeah. But now that you've said that, that's why. We just chose different paths to go down.
The better path is the path in the middle, which is children who feel empowered, children who are emotionally intelligent. Yeah. And those children are going to make bloody solid adults.
Yeah. I need to stop because I need to stop controlling Bella then, because she's very much going down the people-pleasing route, because I'm always like, clean your damn bedroom. Yeah. But no, I need to, what is it you say then? Have a look at your bedroom. What can you see?
Yeah. I mean, it's not going to work. It's not going to work.
Everything on the floor.
It's not going to work perfectly. Yeah. But I think it's like the start of like this kind of more middle way of being. Yeah. And, you know, the thing is, children definitely need boundaries, 100%. But how those boundaries are like enforced makes the difference. So the boundary is the room needs to get tidied, right? Mm-hmm. That's not in dispute. Yeah. How it gets tidied might be that area where we can do a little play with, like have a little dance with ideas around how we could get it tidied.
Yeah, yeah. Amazing. I'll have to have a think. I feel like with parenting, there's always constant learning about how to do things. So this has been very educational. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Shall we go ahead and spin the wheel?
Yes.
So here we go. Here is the wheel. So if you want to go ahead and have a little spin.
So how am I spinning it? I'm just
however
putting it
you
here.
like, yeah.
Okay.
And see what you get. Oh, that's a good one for what we've spoken about. Something that you've learned about motherhood.
Something that I've learned about motherhood is that it's more about me and motherhood.
Yeah.
I am a hell of a lot stronger than I ever dared to believe or imagine.
I love that. I think you learn that when you become a mum, don't you? You're just like, you thought things pre-parenthood were hard. And then you do parenthood and you're like, damn, I am strong.
Like mothers, fathers too, are resilient as hell.
Yeah.
Because you have to be, because there's no it doesn't stop. It's every day.
Yeah.
And that is like a well of strength that I did not know I had. And it's this like well of strength that just grows and grows. And there's been times where I have not felt like that, but like that's where I'm at right now. Like having done all of this work on myself, like I feel like this strength and trust that whatever happens with my kids in my parenting journey, that I will be able to handle it.
Yeah, amazing. Because you can be in the deepest of holes and you could have hit rock bottom, but you still pull yourself out.
You're still going to have to make breakfast.
Yeah, you're still going to have to get out of bed, do the school run, do all the things. So it does make you incredibly resilient being a parent.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, on that note, could you tell everybody where we can find you on social media and online?
Yep. So you can find me at Finding Flow Parenting on Instagram, Facebook, a little bit on TikTok, but not
down with the kids.
Yeah. And my website, www.findingflowparenting.coach. And I'm also on YouTube.
She's everywhere.
I'm everywhere.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I've actually learnt so much today.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you everyone for listening and watching at home. Please let us know if you have any ideas or anything to say in the comments. And remember to subscribe and download as well. Thank you.